welcome to my channel. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe below. I'll talk about our birth center experience. So we decided, I did a lot of research and read also, of course, a lot of horror stories about hospitals and giving birth at a hospital. And so we decided to go with a birth center, even though it was, of course, a lot more expensive, and the insurance only covered it as out of network. By the way, I forgot to mention we're in the States. We live in LA, and basically we decided to go with a birth center despite, you know, the cost and everything. But although the birth center had like 5-star reviews, and I mean, it was a good place and everyone was very nice and knowledgeable, for me, I would still okay, so they seem to be more focused on like your mental state, and they seem to think that all of your symptoms were psychosomatic, which I mean, I did not really appreciate. Every single time we would go there, they would be like, okay, fill out this form, and the form is like, do you feel depressed? How do you feel today? Have you thought of like harming yourself, or have you thought of, I don't know, it was just like every single time, and it was a little bit ridiculous where you know, it was mostly the focus was mostly like on your mental state than your physical state, which should have been more important. And then when I like throughout my pregnancy, I was feeling very, very lightheaded all the time, and I have a desk job, so, and I work at the computer all day long, and so it's very relaxed. I'm sitting down, I'm not really doing anything, you know, crazy. And I came to them and I said, I'm feeling lightheaded all the time. Like I was having a hard time just even sitting at my desk. And they were like, oh, you must be stressed, it's just stress, like don't worry about it, blah blah. But then it went on for months and months and months, and I was feeling really lightheaded. Like I couldn't exercise, you know, I couldn't, like I was feeling lightheaded just sitting down basically. And eventually, as I'll tell in my first story, we ended up transferring to the hospital at 36 weeks. And the very first meeting with the doctor, I told her that I was feeling very lightheaded all the time, and she explained, "Oh yes, this is normal. Of course, this happens to a lot of women. It's because of, you know, because you're pregnant basically." And she said you need to bulk up, which was like bulk up your blood volume. And she said like, oh, just eat something salty, like a salty snack once a day, and then drink a lot of water, which was a very simple solution. She had a very nice explanation for why I was lightheaded basically throughout my pregnancy for like 8 months by that point, actually 9 months by that point, 36 weeks. Yeah, and so I just started eating like more salty stuff, and drinking like water after I ate that, even though I was already drinking a lot of water, but I wasn't eating enough salt basically. And it would have been such an easy solution to my problem, but at the birth center they just did not I don't know, they did not like take my physical state, I guess, seriously. And I don't know, they did not really seem too concerned about anything like physical that could have been like maybe augmented and fixed. And so I mean, would I choose to go to a birth center again? No. I mean, one of the reasons is because of the cost, and secondly because we found a really good doctor. Like the backup doctor was actually really good. You know, at the birth center where when you go, you need to have a backup physician for, in case if you transfer to a hospital, which happened to us. And the reason we were transferred is because I had polyhydramnios, which I'll talk about in a different video. But basically, uh, the birth center was nice. Oh, another thing is, basically they charged us for prenatal care there and postpartum care, but since I did not deliver there, they did not charge us for that. But that that fraction of the cost was actually very small. It was only like 1/8 or something, or 2/8 of the full cost was the labor and delivery fee. But anyway, I mean, we did want to be at a birth center for everything, but in hindsight, I'm glad that we ended up being in the hospital. But of course, we got lucky because we found a really good doctor. Um, I've heard a lot of horror stories about horrible doctors, or like good doctors that don't treat you that great. And I mean, I ended up being with like a more natural oriented doctor. Like when I was pushing, she was using oil, and I mean, I know not every doctor wants to go that route. Um, so yeah, so this was our birth experience, birth center experience, and I don't think we would go back there, even though everybody was very nice. But I didn't really like the focus more on like mental state. I prefer more for the people to like take my concerns more seriously. And when you're pregnant, your body goes through a lot, and I do think that giving birth in the home or at the birth center is a bit of a risk. And um, for me, like I don't think I would probably do that again. But I mean, if we couldn't find a good doctor, maybe we would go that route again. But at the same time, I was glad to have all the medications available for when I did actually need them at the hospital. So. And then another thing which I thought they were not exactly transparent about was, when we did the tour, we asked, I mean, they were telling what was the hospital transfer rate, and they said it was 3%. And then, like, we were like, okay, 3% sounds good, sounds pretty rare. And then, and then when we basically signed up and everything, signed all the papers, we started going to prenatal appointments. We asked one of the midwives what was the hospital transfer rate, and she was like, yeah, it's 25%. And we were like, okay, like that's a pretty different number from what we were told. And I was like, okay, so basically they lied. And then my husband remembered that she was, like during the tour, they were talking about like emergency transfer rate. But I mean, when you're on the tour, you just think like, oh, you're gonna pay all this money, you don't want to be transferred, and you ask what's the transfer rate. Like you don't care if it's emergency, non-emergency. I guess like we didn't really catch that detail when we were talking about this. And then also during the tour, they made it seem like it's very easy to get your insurance to cover your prenatal care as in network if you just call your insurance and let them know, like blah blah, like you basically like send them a letter. And they said like, oh, we have this billing company and they will do it all for you, like it's gonna be so easy basically. And then I spent hours and hours on the phone with my insurance company. I contacted the billing company and they said like, no, they don't even deal with like asking insurance to cover like to cover the care as in network. And basically I spent hours and hours and hours on the phone with insurance company. I sent them several letters. I've called them, like I've appealed their decision, but in the end, like they did not cover it as in network. They covered it as out of network. So at my insurance company, out of network is 60% on top of what they decide should be the fee. So when you're in network, they will cover 80%. Like doesn't matter how much like the hospital or whatever or the doctor charges you, they will cover 80% of that. But with out of network, they will cover 60, but not of what they charge, like what the hospital charges you, for example, but 60% out of what like the insurance decides, basically. So yeah, like and in the end we did not get covered. And then another thing is, when I was about like I think I was starting third trimester. By that time, you know, the recommended weight gain for for me was like 25 to 35 pounds, and I was like 35 pounds, and then I was like at like 40 pounds, and one midwife we met with, she was like, okay, like you're gaining too much weight, you need to start exercising, blah blah, like eat less. What do you eat? And she's like, what do you eat for breakfast? What do you eat for lunch? What do you eat for dinner? And my husband was with me, and he was like, okay, like I am getting really angry. My husband was getting mad at her. He's like, okay, like she's a grown person, she can eat whatever she wants, she doesn't overeat, she eats normal. I mean, there's like they're like, oh, there's so many concerns with gaining too much weight, blah blah. Like you won't be able to birth your baby, or the baby will be too heavy, or like something else will go wrong. And I mean, I'm not gonna like justify my weight gain, because I don't have to, and a lot of people gain a lot of weight in pregnancy, and it's normal, and sometimes your body just needs to gain a lot of weight. Like, of course I would have liked to gain less, but like there was nothing really more I could like physically do to prevent that. Like I was before I got pregnant, I was like pretty much entirely plant-based, and when I got pregnant, all I wanted to eat was like red meat. Like I was like craving beef and steak all the time. Like that's what I like needed, you know. And then in the first trimester, I was very, very nauseous, like at nights all the time. And the only thing that would help me would like eat, like basically to eat food, like greasy stuff and like potatoes and stuff like that. So of course, like I gained weight. But anyways, that's a whole different story. So yeah, with our birth center experience, basically we didn't think they were as transparent. I guess they were transparent, but they were kind of a little bit misleading about the transfer rate. And in the end, of course, we also ended up transferring, and we realized that eventually that, you know, this is a business, and they have a business model, and of course for them, the more people sign up but then transfer care, the better, basically, because that fraction of cost is very, very little. And each prenatal appointment, yeah, it's an hour, but they basically talk about your feelings, about your day, about this and that. They don't actually like treat your problems. Like they don't really treat your physical state. And then as soon as anything like minor goes wrong, they are like, okay, you can't give birth here, like you have to transfer, which is basically what happened to us. But yeah, they were very nice about it. So I mean, in an ideal case scenario, if you have a perfect pregnancy, you don't gain like enough in any weight, you have nothing wrong with you, you feel wonderful all the time, and basically, I don't know, then yeah, you can give birth at a birth center, basically. So yeah, that's our story. Please subscribe if you like this video. Please like this video. Leave me a comment if you had a birth center experience that was positive or negative. I was very curious. I would be very curious to hear some of the like negative birth center experiences, because when I was reading the reviews, all the birth center reviews were really, really awesome, and only one was like 4-star, but it was very detailed, and it kind of made me think like, oh, okay, maybe we shouldn't be at the birth center. But most of the reviews were so amazing, it seemed like you know, too much. Like, yeah, it's wonderful, but I mean, there must be like some pros and cons to it, you know, to the hospital. Also, there's pros and cons, and I wanted to hear both, but I only got to see the pros. So yeah, I would like to hear that in the comments. And thank you, and bye.